Deep in the mountain range between the Slavic-Polish border lies a cave that contains a secret so big it could alter human history as we know it. Discovered by a simple shepherd and his ancestors, it was a well-kept secret for generations, for fear of what lurked inside its depths. Yet one small act of kindness was all it took to bring it to national attention, with scientists around the world unsure of what could cause such a creation. It's time to explore the intricacies of the Moonshaft. Hello everyone and welcome to Wicked Encounters, where we explore just what goes bump in the night. I'm your host Allie, and today we're getting our Splunker hats on and looking into the Moonshaft, otherwise known as the Moon Cave. I prefer Moonshaft because I think it's funny, and I'm sure that unlike Champy, I won't get death threats from my preference between the two. The Moonshaft is a cave in an unspecified mountain range in Slovakia, said to potentially house an underground city, an extraterrestrial spaceship, or be proof of advanced ancient human civilization. I know that's a lot of potential things, but you'll learn why soon, I promise. The cave was discovered by Antonin Horak during the Slovak National Uprising in 1944 that he covered in his diary. Antonin Horak was born in the village Villa de Hermannstadt in Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, on July 7, 1897. The Horak family was quite wealthy, with property that included agriculture, forests, and mines that extended to the German border. Antonin attended school in Prague from 1903 until 1915, where he turned 18 and decided to join the army to fight in the Austro-Hungary conflict. A year later, he was promoted to lieutenant and remained in the army until 1919. After his service, he graduated from the University of Banská Štiavnica in 1921, the University of Prague for Engineering in 1922, the University of Prague for Business Management in 1926, as well as a degree in philosophy. Boy, I sure wish I could afford all that learning, but 4 years for an art degree could have put me in $120,000 of debt, which I thankfully had grants for, so it was only $14,000, but still kinda sucks. Life was pretty good to Horak. In 1939, his family had employed over 500 workers in their properties, able to maintain this workforce with all of the mining, farming, and lumber as mentioned previously. At least until they and the rest of Czechoslovakia were invaded by the Germans, where Horak was arrested by the Gestapo and placed in a forced labor camp. He remained in the camp until 1941, where he escaped and joined the Czechoslovakian forces in Slovakia. While with the army insurgents, he was given the rank of captain in 1943 to 1944. And it was during this time that he made a discovery that would change his life. On October 23, 1944, while fighting in the north-central area of Slovakia, in the Tatra Mountains, Horak and his unit were ambushed by a roving battalion of Nazis. During the skirmish, Horak was stabbed in the hand, shot, and then finally hit in the head with a rifle stock where he lost consciousness. When he came to, he and two of his men were all that remained. Well, one and a half, having been rescued by a sheep herder named Slavik. The remaining men were Jurek, who had a leg injury, and Martin, who was slashed across his stomach and very clearly wasn't going to survive. Still, Slavik helped build a stretcher for the trio to carry Martin in as he led them 4 hours away to a grotto blocked by rocks. As they settled Martin into as comfortable a position as they could, they noticed Slavik praying to each of them, himself, and the grotto before he was going to leave to fetch some things for them. Before he left, though, he begged Horak not to venture further into the cave. While searching for pine boughs, Slavik told Horak that he had only once been in this cave with his father and grandfather before, saying that it was a huge maze of tunnels full of pits, pockets of poisonous air, and certainly haunted. At around midnight, Horak had made his way back to the two other men, where Slavik broke off to return home so that he could come back with food and supplies for the three men. But in the meantime, they would feast on nothing more than hot water and small sips of slivovitz, plum brandy. While told not to explore the cave, Horak also couldn't explore the surrounding area, thanks to the copious amounts of snow, danger of avalanches, and enemies all around. With 2 injured men, it was only asking for trouble. Eventually, though, boredom won out, and with some light urging from Jurek, Horak went in to explore the cave with a rifle, lantern, torches, and a pick. After an hour and a half of walking through rather easy passages, he found himself in a long passage that ended in a barrel-sized hole that he was able to crawl through to the other side once he took his clothes off. I mean, my clothes aren't that bulky that I wear, so if you just want to run around with your dick out, that's fine. When he looked up, he saw what looked like a large black silo framed in white, glass smooth on all sides with beautifully cylindrical curves of a bluish-black material all around a room diameter of roughly 25 meters. Horak struck at the wall with the pick, which only bounced off, leaving not a single mark from his efforts. He continued to notice more and more oddities to the room, including a crack whose floor was made of yellow limestone, before dropping deep beyond the wall. Deciding that he had explored enough for that day, he returned to the others without telling them what he had found, instead saying that he would need smoke, poles, and a rope. Fortunately, Slavik was able to return with his daughter Hanka with provisions for them. The following day, Horak took everyone's belts and cut them to braid 8 meters of solid rope, which he used to go back to the crack in the wall. Descending with the help of the belts, he found himself a new oddity, a room shaped like a large crescent moon that amplified any sound around it. Though besides the interesting amplification and insane man-made look, there was nothing else of note. And so Horak returned once more to the group, though he was determined to return again. And return he did. The crack in the wall was too thin to have the pickaxe fit as it was, so Horak disassembled it, and down to the moonshaft he went. Once inside, he fired 2 bullets up, which caused an immense uproar in the structure. He then fired on the walls themselves, where when the bullets struck, large blue-green sparks and flames danced about wildly. After that, he put the pickaxe together and began digging in both corners of the crescent moon-shaped room, where in one corner, he discovered a large bestial skeleton, whose teeth he took, a canine and a molar, as some souvenirs before going back to digging. When he did, he noticed that the back wall had an undulating pattern that was warmer than the rest of the surface, though his adventure had to end there as he was tired and out of breath. So, he left once more. For all the time he had been gone, he had told Jurek he had gone bat hunting and had constantly come up empty-handed. He didn't want to tell Jurek of his discovery for some reason, but this time he at least returned with 7 bats for the group to eat before Slavik returned with his other daughter, Olga, with some hay and a sheep's fleece for warmth, along with a few medicinal herbs. Horak went with Slavik to grab a few more items as well, to get pine torches and 2 long poles before returning to his men at around midnight. He didn't stay long though, as once more, he went to the shaft where he fired a few more bullets, with most ricocheting and creating a deafening noise and huge sparks. But, when fired horizontally at the back wall, he got sparks, the same roaring, and then noticed the bullet had made a finger-long welt that made a horrific smell. He then went to the warm patterns in the one corner and continued his digging, where he noticed that the pattern continued on and on downwards. Despite his best efforts to obtain a sliver of the material that made the moonshaft, every attempt Horak made only resulted in small welts, blue-green fire, and that horrible smell. While he was gone, Martin died in his sleep, and thus the 2 remaining men had no reason to remain in the cave any longer. Horak made one final journey to the moonshaft, where he lowered a bottle down with a piece of belt containing his name and some other information, as well as the back of his pocket watch, gave it a little kiss, ew, germs, placed rocks up to block off the shaft, and then returned to bury Martin. They paid Slavik for his help and to put up a cross for Martin come spring when he was able to. Jurek also asked to marry Hanka, to which he agreed, and Horak said he would attend their wedding if possible. In the last few days of World War II, Horak returned to the cave, visited Martin's grave, and, well, that was that. 20 years later, he wrote everything down in a backdated journal where he expressed his wishes for the cave to be studied by scientists, while also sternly lecturing against the possibility of the moonshaft becoming a tourist attraction and disrupting the villagers' simple way of life.
It's time to stop!
Rude. And that's it. So, what could the moonshaft be? Well, Horak at one point spoke to Dr. George W. Moore, who suggested that the moonshaft may have been dissolved from a steeply dipping limestone layer between curved parallel sheets of chert. Though, of course, Horak was skeptical of that idea since the entire chamber was made of the same material, and the inner surfaces were all exactly parallel, with the grooved pattern in the back wall corner being the only exception. Also, that didn't make as interesting of a story. Another theory that is brought up in the book The Moon Cave Mystery is that the Moonshaft is an ancient copper ore mining facility. When copper is put under a flame, it produces a green color, similar to Horak's rifle shots. Copper crystals are also very heavy and can't be easily scratched, and can make a super stinky, unpleasant odor when mixed with water. Caves maintain the average temperature of their location, with one in Slovakia averaging out at 6.5 to 7.1 degrees Celsius, or 43.7 to 44.78 Fahrenheit. A bit cold, but warm enough for snow to melt if it gets inside of the cave and possibly help make things slick in the Moonshaft. The ancient copper mine idea is an interesting one because Horak had also gone to the curator of paleontology at Uzhgorod, who identified the teeth he had collected as belonging to a 6.5-foot tall cave bear, Ursus spalius to be exact, which went extinct more than 25,000 years ago. What this basically means is, somehow, a cave bear ended up getting into a mining facility whose entrance is so thin, Horak almost wasn't able to fit unless he was naked with disassembled tools, in a time period before the wheel was invented. Now don't get me wrong, humans have been mining for 40 to 20,000 years in Africa, for coal. Copper wasn't first mined until 8,000 to 5,000 BC in the regions we now know as Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. And the fact that this potential mine was discovered in Slovakia, well, it put the ancient civilization believers' heads spinning, with some of them saying that the construction of the Moonshaft with the cave bear skeleton inside of it would put it somewhere around the same time that Atlantis is believed to have fallen. Even better, Horak wasn't the only one to claim to have found mysterious man-made tunnels. A professor named Jean Pagot said that when he was a teenager, he explored a few glass tunnels with his father in the Carpathian Mountains, though these ones were large enough to fit a train through, and the walls would glisten as if carved by a drill. Their footfalls made no sounds, as if the floors were lined with some kind of material. At the end of the tunnel, the professor said was a large chamber, with notched walls that formed a spiral pattern, and several tunnels converged onto it. Pagot's father told him that the further tunnels led out of the main chamber, and they led to every country and every continent around the world. Pagot's father then pointed out signs in the chamber, clumsy drawings scribbled with black paint, but at just that moment, Professor Pagot said that the chamber began rumbling and hissing as if the train he imagined was passing through. Once the commotion began, the professor's father said they had to leave immediately. Once they were out of the tunnels, Pagot's father said that they were made by all-powerful underground creatures that traveled through the tunnels on flying machines. Hollow Earth theory made an appearance! Ooh! Now, another theory the authors of the Moon Cave Mystery proposed is that the entire thing was a Cold War intelligence game. Horak's tale was first told in 1965 when Czechoslovakia was still under Soviet sway, and it's very possible that the Moonshaft story was a way to imply that their forces were greater than they first appeared, due to technology that was incomprehensible to modern-day humans. Though there have been some correlations to suggest that Horak's story is true, or at least parts of it. In 1994, Czech geologist Walter Pavlis explored several caves in the Tatra Mountains. In one of them, he found the letters HA, the number 23, and 6 crossed lines carved into the stone. Horak Antonin, 23rd of October, 6 days in the cave. Though the cave had no opening in the rear wall. In 2019, Slovak web portal Kez Okno received information that one of their followers identified a place in a small mountain range, Baruchna, where the vegetation grew in the shape of a crest. They believed the Moonshaft to be a slickenslide, a naturally occurring event where 2 enormous blocks of stone move in opposite directions, which result in smoothing and darkening of their surfaces. Slickensides are used to determine the direction of movement along fault lines, and their history was straight slicken lines indicating linear translation fault movement. Basically, they're what happens when a whole lot of friction happens upon 2 very heavy stone, and it rubs out all the roughness. The theory is that natural geological processes caused the gap between the 2 blocks to grow bigger, which created the unusual cavity. That same year, explorer Eric Batista visited a cave in Baliansky Tatry. He found a fireplace, letters written on one of its walls, and a pile of stones that looked like a grave. That cave did have an opening in the rear wall, but seemed to be too unstable to be explored safely, and then that part of the cave collapsed later that year. I have one more theory that I want to bring up, and this comes from James Horak, Antonin's nephew, who spoke to Kevin Smith on his show about perhaps the most out there theory I've ever heard of, the roaming moon theory, and what the moonshaft could be to it. According to him, this moonshaft is one of 144 shafts that were placed by the Druge, who were a civilization on Mars nearing spiritual attainment. They're placed grid-like around the Earth's mantle, so that Earth would become suitable for humans to live in, and have been there for 325,000 years. What's more, when positioned correctly, they can be controlled on Earth or underneath the surface of Mars to move the moon about to intercept the asteroid field approaching the Earth, since the moon was used as a vehicle to bring mankind to Earth 350,000 years ago. Now, James Horak says that during World War II, the moonshaft his uncle found was then moved by the Russians and put next to another moonshaft in Lake Vostok, Antarctica, which is incredibly bad, since they release pressure buildup in volcanoes and reduce earthquakes by reaching into the Earth's core like dipsticks and adjusting the pressure on the mantle. So having two of them side by side is perhaps the worst idea ever. Also, how did Russians move a fucking moonshaft and get it to Antarctica? Fuck you, that's how. The guy actually just kind of says that's a stupid question to ask, which, like, no, it's not. Show your work. All right. But what do you think? Do you believe that Horak found an ancient man-made structure? Could it link up to other such tunnels all around the world? Does Russia have the capability of moving an entire goddamn mountain to Antarctica, threatening our lives as we know it for the impending asteroid apocalypse? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read them all for future video ideas and to see how many other people enjoy learning about spooky stuff like myself, or just plain strange things like this. If you want to see what I release in the future, consider subscribing, liking this video, clicking the bell, and sharing it with others. Many of my videos are thanks to suggestions given to me, so feel free to let me know what you'd like to see covered next. Also, let me know if you'd be interested in learning more about the theory of ancient civilizations like Atlantis and Lemuria. There are some wild rides, like all conspiracy theories are. I wanted to give cryptids a little bit of a break, and I've also been thinking of adding some true crime to the channel. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's a good idea, or do you want me to really stick more to the cryptid bit? Finally, I'd like to give a big thank you to my patrons. Your support means the world to me, and I'm so thankful to have you. With that, I'm Allie, this is Wicked Encounters, and I'll see you next time. Bye!